Hello and welcome to this episode of Cloudbytes TV, where we are reviewing Salesforce DevOps for Architects. This is a book by Cowell and Lars Malmqvist. I'm really looking forward to talking to you about it. As you can see, I took loads of notes, found lots of interesting different points in the book, and so I'm ready to give this a review. So let's dive on in for Salesforce DevOps for Architects. The book states its target audience as, if you're a Salesforce architect or senior developer looking to bring DevOps best practices to your project, this book is for you. The term architect is one that's quite broadly used in the Salesforce space, and I would say that if you're a solution architect or a technical architect, you will get some value out of this book, and it's probably going to be useful for you. I'd also say, obviously, if you're a senior developer, as the book says itself, you'll get some value out of this. But for an admin as well, this book's going to be quite useful. If you're an admin that's working on an org that's got a number of different teams working in it, you may have a team of admins that you're working on, and it's not just you by yourself looking after a few users, you're probably going to get some value from this book. And there's a lot of overlaps in this book with some of the stuff that's in Jody Herbeck's Rock Your Role as a Salesforce Admin. We did a review of that previously. You can watch that here. And the bits that overlap are around things like request management and governance. So if you're an admin, a consultant who's looking to maybe implement and help people understand best practices around DevOps, or an architect or a senior developer yourself, this book is probably going to be for you. The one thing that the book does ask you have some understanding of is XML and JSON. And reading through the book, I don't think you need to have a deep understanding of either XML or JSON. It's more just a high-level understanding of what they are, really, is the fact that metadata on Salesforce is stored as XML, how that might look, have the ability to sort of read through an XML or a JSON document and make sense of it. But even if you don't have that understanding or that knowledge, the pieces in the book that use JSON or use XML are really clearly explained. The code samples are really kind of well stepped through and understood. So you're not going to find anything that blocks you from getting the real value out of that book if you don't have that understanding. The book itself is around 17 chapters long and isn't officially split into sections, but I'm going to explain it as being split into these following three sections is how I read the book and how I understood it. The first section focuses on the background of what DevOps is, what it means, what CI and CD mean, why they're used interchangeably in some areas and why they shouldn't be in other areas, and really just kind of glossary and background of the process of running a DevOps process and why you might want to kind of do it. What's the benefits of it? Part two is then really getting into the nuts and bolts of delivering efficiently, delivering effectively, how you're actually going to do DevOps, really. Yeah, what are the processes and practices you're going to put in place and some of the setup you're going to do around that. And then part three is an overview of the different tools that are out there. So the book goes through a lot of the commercial tools that are available and also some of the open source alternatives. I think it's a really good structure. The hardest thing I think for any technical book, and I know myself having written a couple, is to get a narrative going through. And I think the book's narrative works really well here. I think it steps through things nicely, gives you the background, shows you how to start implementing it by yourself and what you're going to need to put in place, and then finally talks about the tools that are available for you. I know working with a lot of customers that one of the biggest headaches is deciding which tool, if any, to use is the best. And there's a lot of them out there in the Salesforce space right now, and the book does a great job of covering all of them and just helping you get an understanding of what the different tools are so that by the end of it, you'll know why you should do DevOps, what you're going to need to do DevOps, and then finally what tools are available and which one you might want to consider implementing in order to start doing DevOps. As I mentioned, the book starts off in section 1 with an overview of the background of DevOps, of CI, CD, all the processes, what they mean, why you might want to do them, and what all those acronyms mean. And that's kind of really key for you to get started, is knowing why you might want to do DevOps. I really liked chapter 2, which gives a good focus on the strategy and cultural aspects of implementing a DevOps process. I've been an external consultant in a number of places where I've helped them implement DevOps processes as part of their delivery and project. And truth be told, the cultural transformation that's required is often the biggest stumbling block. People don't want to really change how they're doing things. They think they're working in the best way possible now. They are possibly working for them well now, now and they're not really comfortable moving across or making the changes needed to allow them to deliver faster. And the book covers that off really well. I think it's such a key area. They talk about the famous Drucker misquote of culture eats strategy for breakfast. What they're really talking about here and what the authors really focus on is the idea that no matter how well documented or agreed upon your delivery strategy is at the top, you can say as an executive, we're doing DevOps, we're going to start doing it this way, we're going to start delivering this way. If the team aren't bought into doing it, if you don't have the right culture in place, none of that's going to matter. The rest of the section focuses really well on some of the other background pieces that you're going to look at. So it's things like SFDX, it's the different frameworks you're going to want to work with, and just the different prerequisites for being successful with DevOps. The overall section just lays the groundwork really well so that coming out of it, you feel like you understand what DevOps is and why you might want to do it, as well as some of the common pitfalls you're going to have when you're trying to convince people to undertake a DevOps process and get started with it. The second section of the book focuses really on the practices and processes you're going to put in place to start delivering DevOps effectively. Some of those things are going to be things like CI/CD automation, ticket management, data backups, change monitoring, data seeding, things you're going to need to do in order to make sure that your processes are running effectively and that you're looking at the holistic approach to DevOps. It's not just about pushing tickets through a system, it's about the overall structure of the system and the org to make sure it stays in the best condition possible and that you have things like backups and like data seeding to make your testing more efficient. The chapters are really detailed, they cover off everything really end to end really well, and there's an example CI/CD pipeline in there as well that you can get started with as well to use, which is really good. And then there's a chapter on ticketing systems which is really detailed and thorough and goes into 3 of the popular different ticketing systems. That's Jira, Asana, and Azure Work Items. Most organizations I've worked with are using one of those 3. Some might be using Salesforce for managing things, but there's a great deal of information in there as to how you might want to manage your work in order to make your DevOps process more smooth. And I think, again, this is a key thing that people sometimes miss, and particularly developers miss, is that it's all well and good thinking about my DevOps in terms of having a build pattern and how the code gets run through its tests and how it gets deployed between environments, at a push of a button. But part of the DevOps process is making sure you understand where the work is, how it's refined, how it's pulled through the different stages and different gates, and how that interacts with the humans that are doing the testing and delivery of it. So it's a really good set of chapters on that. The other chapter that I really enjoyed reading about was data backup and recovery. There's a lot of information there around regulatory considerations, so GDPR, CCPA, things like that. Stuff you need to consider if you're looking after data in a backup, stuff you need to consider about getting rid of that data, and again, often the governance side of things is less considered, specifically within the Salesforce space when we're talking about DevOps. It's often a very technical conversation, as it's often led by a technical team. So have a think and have a read around those chapters as well. Make sure you involve your data privacy team and data privacy officers to just keep everything correct and make sure you're not falling foul of any rules, really, because no one wants to do that. I would say if you've implemented a DevOps process before, a lot of this is going to be stuff you've covered off. As someone who's implemented DevOps, a number of different companies using a number of different tools and kind of processes and ways of doing it, there was a lot of material I was going back over here, but I still found it very useful, a great refresher, and there's still a few things I learned. So even if you might consider yourself a bit more seasoned in delivering DevOps, you'll definitely find something you haven't thought about here. And just as a good example, if you're a developer coming in and looking at this, you'll probably find something that you haven't thought about in terms of the governance side of things. If you're an architect, you'll probably not have thought as hard perhaps about things such as the ticket workflow and request system. So there's going to be something in here for you to learn from, no matter what your position, no matter what your experience level. The final section of the book covers off a number of commercial and open source tools that'll help you answer the question, what do I need to get started? One of the major headaches I know a lot of people have when trying to get DevOps started and running in their organization is, which tools do I need? How much are they going to cost? Do I need to pay for a tool? Can I use an open source one? Do I build my own? What are the pros and cons of each? And all of those different kind of decisions in there. This book covers off a lot of tools in a great amount of detail, and having used a number of them, I can say in a very fair way as well. So coming out of this, you're going to have a much better understanding of what the strengths and weaknesses of each of the tools are, which ones you might want to consider or not consider, and which ones you might want to evaluate. In the order of the book, these are the tools that are covered, just to give you an example of how exhaustive the list is. They are GearSet, Capado, Flowsome, AutoRabbit, Salesforce DevOps Center, Salto, Panaya, Prodly, Elements Cloud, Opsera, Happy Soup, SFDX Hardis, DX at Scale, and Cumulus CI. As you can see on the screen, that's a very exhaustive list. I know there's a couple of other newer players in the market space as well that aren't on that list, but this is going to give you a great flavor of so many of the systems that you'll know what questions to ask, what things you might want to use and might not want to use, so that you can actually get up and running and start doing DevOps. Overall, I really love this book. As someone who's implemented DevOps a few times, it's got a great amount of detail in there. It's got things that if I were doing this for the first time, I'd want to pick up and learn about. As someone who's done it before, there's a few good tips and extras in there as well, so I've definitely learned some additional things. 220 pages as well. It's not too onerous, it's not too big. It's just about the right size for you to go through and digest and start to think about how you're going to implement DevOps yourself. And the coverage of the different tools in the back is really useful. As someone who's helped customers and has himself gone away and just Googled all the different tools before and the pros and cons and had to learn through them, that information alone is just really, really useful. So if you're a Salesforce architect, a senior developer, or an admin that is looking to start doing DevOps, I would say definitely go out and buy this book. It's really, really useful. If you've done DevOps before, you'll probably still find something useful and interesting in the book, and it'll just probably sharpen up your thoughts and understanding of things and maybe give you some different ways of approaching the subject when you're talking to stakeholders about it. So I want to say thank you to Lars and to Rob for writing this book. If you want to get your copy, there's a link in the description below where you can buy it on Amazon. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe so you stay up to date with all the latest podcasts, book reviews, and other videos that we're putting out there. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video.